Hi, I'm Scott Noonan, the CEO of Audio Advice. This video is part of our home theater design series that covers virtually everything about designing a home theater. When it comes to the finishing touch on the audio system side of a great home theater, nothing can beat accurate and powerful bass. Even if you have large tower speakers, it's highly likely you will want one or more subwoofers to bring that bass realism into your home theater. You want to be able to hear the texture and sound quality of bass tones, so a roaring race car engine or a rocket explosion both sound and feel as lifelike as possible. Getting accurate, good bass for all of the seats in your home theater and not just one sweet spot is more of a challenge than you might think at first. All speakers interact with your room, and nothing interacts more than the lower frequencies. If you want to understand just how much your room alters the sound, put on a song with a deep bass track, then walk around your room listening when you are against the wall, in the middle of the room, and in different spots. It's highly likely you'll notice that some frequencies are very loud in some locations and almost completely missing in others. When sound comes out of a speaker, some of it arrives at your listening position directly from the speaker, but a lot more bounces around the room first before you hear it. This is especially true for lower tones, as they do not get absorbed by furniture or carpet. In simple terms, as the bass frequencies bounce around, the dimensions of your room cause some frequencies to increase in volume and others to decrease. To make matters worse, this varies depending on the distance you are from each wall. If you think about this, there are actually two factors affecting bass: the placement of your subwoofer and where you sit. Sometimes you do not have a choice, but if you do, the best spot to have your main seats is roughly 2/3 of the distance from your front wall to your back wall. The worst spot for intersections of dips and peaks would be in the exact center of your room. Sitting right against the back wall will cause you to hear more peaks, which will make your bass boomier. For those of you who can control your seating position, targeting around 2/3 in should be your first step. If you're building a new theater or updating your current one, if you use our free home theater design tool at audioadvice.com, it will actually tell you where all of your front, side, rear, and Atmos speakers should go depending on your room dimensions and setup. However, nailing down the placement of your subs takes a little more work. Let's start with talking about a simple way to improve the bass performance in your room. If you are noticing some bass tones are a lot louder than others, you can try moving your subwoofer around a little bit, as this will change how it interacts with your room. You might be surprised at the difference less than a foot or two can make. Another option that has emerged with new technology are subwoofers with built-in room correction. These subs generally come with a microphone and software that analyzes the frequency response at your listening position, and they will automatically improve the bass performance. So if you already have a full theater setup and want to improve your bass, upgrading to a better subwoofer with good room correction is a nice option and can make your system sound way smoother. If you go this route, we have detailed reviews of the best calibration-enabled subs in the home theater section at audioadvice.com. The catch is, while software can cut back a big bass peak, it's virtually impossible for the system to increase a big bass dip generated by a subwoofer in a given room. The impact of the room just can't be overcome by throwing more and more power at one or two frequencies. So for those of you seeking out the best possible experience, the real solution from a physics standpoint is to have more than one sub in your room. Since the bass dips and peaks are caused by how the subwoofer reacts with the room, if you put another sub in a different spot in your room, the two will provide different peaks and valleys across different seating positions, thereby evening out the frequency response across more of the seating positions. The more subwoofers you place into a room, the better the final result. Not only will you reduce the number of dips and peaks, but you will also get a more effortless bass sound, as each subwoofer does not have to work as hard to get to the correct volume level when their sounds are combined. Now, I'm going to go over our primary suggestions on subwoofer placement for the most common situations. Bear in mind that every room is different, so you'll want to start with these suggestions and concepts and likely make slight adjustments based on your individual situation. I'm going to focus on subwoofer placement for now versus calibration, which is another video linked in the description. I also like to talk about subwoofer placement using the 3 Ps on determining where your subs go. First, you want to find the best placement for performance. Then, you decide if the location is practical given your room. And finally, is it pretty? In other words, let's find the best place acoustically that also works well and looks decent in your room. For a single subwoofer, I recommend you put it on the front wall, and if possible, put the subwoofer towards one of the front corners. Having the subwoofer in a corner will couple the subwoofer better to the room, giving you more bass impact. You will then use the calibration software on your subwoofer or home theater receiver to even out the bass response. So the concept with one subwoofer is that we're trying to add maximum bass energy into the room and then use software, if you have it on your receiver, to cut off the peaks that are too high. If you can, try placing your sub just a few inches out from the corner so it's not totally up against the wall. Lower performance subs may have to be closer to the corner to get you the bass impact you want, but will also naturally cause bigger peaks and dips. So if you go with one sub, try to get the highest performance one you can with good calibration capability if you don't have sub calibration on your receiver. If your receiver has a good calibration system like Dirac or Anthem Room Correction, then focus on getting the best subwoofer you can and getting it into the right place in the room. As long as you have the sub on the front with your main speakers, it does not really matter which corner you choose if your room is a rectangle. Either side should work. For those of you willing to experiment further, there are 2 other methods I like to use to find the best spot for a single subwoofer. The first is known as the subwoofer crawl. Now, I want to warn you, this is a little bit of work, but extremely effective. All right, so now what we're going to do for the subwoofer crawl, you're actually going to put the subwoofer in your main listening position about as close as you can to where actually your ear would be. So I've got it on top of this black case, and what we're going to do is actually move around in the room, listening to where the sub would actually be, meaning our head's going to be closer to the floor. And from a physics standpoint, all we've done is reversed the position of the sub and the listener, and we can actually get the same acoustics in the room. So wherever we hear the deepest and fullest and balanced bass is where we're actually going to place the sub. All right, so now that I've got the subwoofer placed in my main listening chair, from a physics standpoint, all I want to do is put my ear in the different places that the subwoofer would actually sit to see when I'm playing tracks that have repeating sort of deep bass, what sounds the fullest, most balanced bass. So I'll start by listening here, and you can actually, really feel the sound, and then you can move about a foot, and I can hear a little bit different. It's a little bit better. As I get into the corner, now I can hear it's a little bit too boomy. It's sort of too tight in the corner, and I start to move a little bit in the front. Well, oh, this starts to sound really good. And I can move around and find out, wow, this is the spot that the sub should go without having to move the sub around. Of course, you could do the same thing by moving the subwoofer around and you sitting in the position, but it's a whole lot easier to do the sub crawl. You may find the best spot is not practical or pretty, or you may not like the idea of the crawl. Another way is to put the subwoofer in the general location you think it will fit best in your room, then just do a little listening. Okay, so if you're not going to do the subwoofer crawl, the other way to do it is to take your subwoofer and you're going to put it in the corner like this. And then you're going to put on a good track that's got some good bass, sit and listen to it. It's easiest if you have a second person helping you. You'll listen there, and then you're going to move the sub over about 1 foot. And you're going to listen. How full is the bass? What are you hearing? Then we're going to move it over another foot, and you're going to hear it there. And as you slowly move it, you're going to be able to feel where the best spot is. For instance, in this room, closer to the corner. So we're going to try in approximately 1 foot increments all the way across. Then let's go back to the corner and identify what's best on the front wall. Then we're going to work our way down the side wall. So we'll go start in the corner. We're going to move it about 1 foot. We're going to test it here, listening again to the tracks and seeing what's fullest and sounds best. Then we're going to pull it forward another foot. So now we've sort of figured out along that wall and this wall, where is it best? And let's say we've concluded, as it is in this room, that the best spot is right here. The last thing we want to do is then work our way out a little bit away from it, and then work our way a little bit closer and figure out where the best spot is there. That gets us nailed in terms of general placement, so we're ready to move to calibration. If you have a receiver or processor with room correction, such as Dirac or Anthem room correction, these steps are less critical, as those two do an amazing job of smoothing out bass issues. But if you want the ultimate in performance, these listening steps are still worthwhile doing. Now, let's move on to having two subs. Having two subs is a far greater improvement than you would think. There are two big advantages to having two subwoofers. First, if they're properly placed, two subs will greatly reduce the effect of standing waves where certain bass frequencies are either too quiet or too loud. If they're in different spots in the room, one sub may have a dip where the other has a peak, thus evening out. The second improvement is in the dynamics and lack of strain. When you have two subs, neither is having to play as loud as one sub would have to. This gives them more headroom for dynamic effects, and your bass sounds just seem to be more effortless since they're not working as hard. There are a couple of options for placing two subs in a home theater that work really well. First, you can put them both on the front wall near the corners. Another great option is to put them in diagonally opposite corners. This is often the best solution because it addresses the natural room resonance created by both the length and the width of the room. Bear in mind, this type of placement will work best if your home theater receiver has the option to adjust the distances of each subwoofer independently, or if your subwoofers have the ability to continually adjust phase. Also, if your seats are pretty much right near the back wall, you may find using the front two corners is better because you don't have phase alignment issues that can result from having one sub pretty much on top of you while the other is quite far away. I get into this more in the calibration video, but if you have a receiver with really good calibration software like Dirac or Anthem room correction, then you have more flexibility in placement because the software will do a very good job adjusting to smooth out the bass. Just like I pointed out for one subwoofer, you can always take things a step further. With two subs, the subwoofer crawl is not as necessary as it is with one sub, as two subs are so much better in evening out bass response in the room. To fine-tune things, you can still get some benefit from playing around with the position of each one, as I suggested for one sub. Just try it with only one sub turned on at a time and then both of them together. Just like the fact that no one has ever told us their screen was too big, no one has ever complained about having too many subs in a room. With 4 subwoofers, you can experience tight and accurate bass across all seats in a theater that makes watching movies incredibly lifelike. It's almost indescribable until you've been in a super high-performance theater. The ultimate way to go from a physics standpoint is most often to put one on each midpoint of the 4 walls of your room. This is usually not practical, but does result in extremely even bass response in most rooms. If you think about most room setups, the most practical location when you want 4 subwoofers is to put one in each corner of the room. This can work incredibly well and will give you very even and impactful bass response for all of your seats. Ideally, you will want a surround sound processor or receiver that can individually calibrate 4 subwoofers for this type of setup. But at a minimum, you will want one that allows you to calibrate 2 independent subwoofers, which you would then set up as your front 2 together and your back 2 together. 4 subs evens out the bass distribution so well that if you have a surround sound processor with sub calibration, in most cases, you really will not need to worry about doing the subwoofer crawl or fine tuning of the placement as we discussed for 1 and 2 subs. Once you've nailed your placement, you'll want to move on to our subwoofer calibration video. If you're designing a theater or improving yours, I highly recommend you check out our YouTube playlist that covers all things home theater related. Also, check out our home theater section at audioadvice.com where you can find our free home theater design tool, buyer's guides, inspiration gallery, and a host of how-to videos and install videos. I've found nothing puts a grin on the faces of your friends and family more than a home theater with incredible bass impact that rivals or even betters the best commercial theaters. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to the audio experts at Audio Advice via chat, email, phone, or drop by one of our award-winning showrooms. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.